Hi, everybody, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Reenactors Corner because I suddenly found Ricky from America right here in Oslo. And I met him at Gap last year, and I would like to talk to him more about his reenacting career.
Hey guys, how's it going? Glad to be here. Just came over to Norway. Arrived yesterday. Been enjoying it a lot. A lot of history here, and I was very impressed and surprised to see how Normandy played a big part in the resistance and the occupation when the Germans were here. A lot of good history here. It's a very interesting town. And I do highly recommend if you stop by here, go check out the museums. A lot of good stuff there, and you will learn a lot.
But come on, Ricky, tell us why you're in Norway. Of all places.
Of all places? Well, I got a buddy of mine, old friend of mine, that's getting married this weekend. So I gave Lasse a call, told him I was going to be in town, and now I'm here with him.
So yeah, I met you at Gap last year.
That's
the last
right.
Gap. And, well, yeah, now you're here, I guess.
Yeah.
So how did you start with reenacting?
Wow, that's a very interesting question for me because growing up in Puerto Rico, there's no big following into World War II reenacting, and from what I knew about reenacting, being kind of an outsider, people did Civil War. So when I was in the Marines, I was stationed in California, and I went to this air museum. I see a bunch of guys dressed up as British paratroopers. And I thought to myself, what are these guys doing here? So I went up, asked them, like, hey, guys, you work for the museum or something like that? They're like, no, we're reenactors. And I'm like, what?
Dude, you're talking about that you were the public asking stupid questions.
Absolutely. I was in the public, and I was completely blown away that people did this, and it was, I thought it was the awesomest thing, like these guys are making this come to life, and they have uniforms, weapons, equipment, and for them, it was probably a stupid question, but for me, it wasn't. You probably had other people come up to them and make even stupider questions where they're probably asking them why they have a beret on or something like that. For me, I was like,
are you sleeping in that tent?
Exactly. I was like, why are you guys dressed as the Red Devils? Why do you have where did you get that Sten gun? Where do you get that SMLE? And they had a flyer, which I think I have it back home in Puerto Rico. And that's what it started all. The big problem for me was that I went back to Puerto Rico, and this was 15 years ago where you didn't have the advent of social media. So it was kind of impossible to get a hold of people back then, especially for a guy like me, where I was willing to come to an event at least once a year. And, you probably know this when you make the journey to Gap. For you, it's a big deal because, you have to take time off. You have to schedule the traveling, you got to lay money aside. So I got a hold of a unit, but they were just disbanding. The guy was about to retire, and he had a fire sale. He sold all his stuff. He told me that if I would have given him a call 2 weeks prior, I probably had all his kit.
Huh. Was that a unit in Puerto Rico?
No. Yeah, there's no reenacting World War II reenacting units in Puerto Rico. They have 18th century, 17th century stuff like that. There's a few guys that do Spanish American War. But yeah, nothing World War II related. It's a it's a big challenge because you you can't run around with the weapons the way you do in the U.S. and Europe. If you have a gun license, you're only allowed to keep it in your home or go to the gun range. And it's pretty hard to get replicas too because you need to have a company that has a um, you have to have a company under your name so you could get all these replicas like a Bifong or even a Denix. Like you can't ship that to Puerto Rico. Um, but I kind of got unmotivated and tired of trying to chase people, and I dropped it. And for 10 years, I thought nothing of it until Facebook came around and you start having groups in Facebook. And since I always been big into Fallschirmjäger, I always read about them ever since I was a kid. One day I see a group called Grün Teufel, and I look at the group and it's reenactors. So I asked to join, and naturally, still living in where I was living, I thought about the closest state, which is Florida, like we all do in Puerto Rico. So I gave a shout like, hey, anybody has a group of reenactors in Florida? And they referred me to somebody, and I got a hold of them, and I said, hey, I want to do an event with you guys. What do I need to do? He gave me a list of stuff to get, initially, like since it was a Fallschirmjäger unit that was doing a Mediterranean scenario. So you had to get the Trops, the Luftwaffe tropical shirt, the blouse, the pants. I got the hat and the boots as well. And the unit leader said, you know what? If you could start with that, I could loan you the rest of the gear and come on up, And it felt kind of weird because I was kind of like on a doing this by myself, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and I didn't know anybody. But the first event you go to, you do realize that all your life you thought that you were like this big history freak, and everyone looked at you kind of weird because you you were into World War II and its history, and all of a sudden you're just thrown into um, with like-minded people that have that same passion that you have for this, and it was pretty comforting, since day one. You talk to people and you learn from them, and you realize that you don't know everything about World War II, and you keep learning, and I think that was one of the awesomest feelings of starting and reenacting, where you realize that there's people like you. There's people that do this, and they want to share this with other people, and it's cool when you have people to help you get the right stuff, and we all have done it where we just like impulse buy something because it looks cool, and then you learn from them like, hey, that's not the right thing to get. And I've been doing this for 5 years, and it's just something that I enjoy a lot, and I've gotten to meet people from all over the world. If it weren't for this, I wouldn't be here with you right now. So um, it's nice to see that there's like-minded people.
Yeah, because reenactors are kind of like a big community.
Exactly, and like for instance, I when I got a hold of the guys in Spain, and when Ben went to Spain, I talked to my friend Juan Carlos, like, hey, my friend's going over there for 6 months. Could you hook him up with a few events? And he's like, yeah, of course, and you create this community, and it's like a brotherhood, and people help other people, and if you're in the area, like there's always like somebody around, So it's nice to have that.
I kind of feel like wherever in the world you go, there's like reenactors around that will like offer you a bed to sleep on and anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So even though you spend thousands of dollars on kit, you'll spend less on hotels when you travel.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because the first 2 or 3 years that I've reenacted, I my big challenge was when I used to live in Puerto Rico was getting to an event, and it's for me it wasn't just getting to the event, it was bringing my kit and always worrying about having a rifle, because the rest of the kit, it's not you could check the bag, toss everything in there, but the big challenge is the weapon. A lot of times you can't take that with you. It's an extra cost. You have to. There's some security things with it as far as having it locked and secured, and there's always someone there that has your back for a weapon. There's always someone there that like, hey, stay with us, and all you have to do is just throw it out there like, hey guys, I'm coming from so and so place, and who can I fall in with? Is there someone that could lend me a rifle? Is someone could lend me a shovel? If anyone has extra space in their tent, because everyone's been there, and like right now, I have my friends from Chile coming up for the D-Day event, and it's like, hey, I got you guys covered. I'll find something. I'll find what you need. And
That's how it should be.
that's how it, without a doubt. Because we've all started there. We've all showed up with incomplete kits. We've all shown up where we don't know what we're doing exactly, and we need that guidance. And there's moments where you show up with the wrong stuff. I've done it myself, because I don't know any better, and I'm trying to research, but sometimes we're afraid to ask. Sometimes you just think it's the right thing, but you need those people to guide you and mentor you, and help you along the way, and I think the first year is like it's a work in progress, because that's where you realize all your mistakes, and you find out what not to do, what to do, and you need to find out the hard way, like getting the wrong things and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should have asked my unit leader. I should have asked someone, my
Everybody's
sponsor.
been there.
Everyone's been there, and there's no shame in that. Some people are harder than others, but we've all been there. The main thing is to learn from it.
But you mentioned a D-Day event.
Yeah.
Where's that? Where is it?
In Ohio.
Because you live in mainland USA now.
Yeah. So I moved up to New England about 3 years ago, and yeah, it got a whole lot easier for me, and I got a lot of good friends in the area that are reenactors, and we meet outside of the hobby, and it's it's pretty nice, it's like a family away from home for me, and that Ben always hangs out with me, and we, it's Ben has a lot of experience, and I admire that from him. Like whenever I show something to him and he says buy it, like I know that I'm good. He has really good knowledge, and you learn from people and you pass that on. And that's how it always should be. And you have people that care about this hobby, and therefore they care about you doing it right. You know, they don't want you to do the wrong thing.
As you said, it's one big family.
Exactly, you know, and
But I don't think our podcast listeners are too familiar with who Ben is. Ben is in your group. Are you in Sikringsregiment 100 as well?
I sometimes I'll do events with him, but yeah, he's with Sick Rooms Regiment. He's with Chris.
Yeah.
He he's been in the hobby more time than me.
Yeah, well, I do want to make an interview with him.
Oh, yeah.
He's the traveling reenactor after all.
Yeah, he's you know, he's beat me, and you know that I get around. You know. But I wouldn't doubt that sooner or later you'll get around an interview with him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He'll be around Europe sometime.
Oh yeah.
Pretty soon.
He's pretty well known. Everyone asks for him, like, "Hey, how's Ben doing?" Like last year I went to Spain. It was just like 20 people just came up to me. So, "Hey, where's Ben? Why is he not? He's not here this year." There's a really good. There's this guy in Spain that does a lot of good reproduction leather gear for the German side, and his first aid bandages are excellent, and Ben just like bought them all. And like a funny anecdote is, like, I showed up to that same military fair, and he's like, "Hey, is Ben here?" And I'm like, no, why? Okay, because last time he bought all my bandages and left me without him in the first hour.
That's awesome, though. So, who was that Spanish guy who made the...
His name's Rafa. I forget. He uses a German name for his products. I think it's Ralph or something like that. He You'll see him mostly in Spain, doing the markets and the fairs they do down there. They do a lot of military shows down in Spain where you could get a lot of cool stuff. It's funny because a lot of the reenactors in Spain do GI, and for them it's really hard to get GI. And over there it's pretty easy to get some German stuff, you know. And like, for instance, one of our friends, you know, he's always telling us, "Hey, if you see anything, you know, let me know." And we have like a little exchange going on. Like, he'll get us stuff, I'll get him stuff. Like right now, you know, one of the impressions I have is the Blue Division. I have a Blue Squadron impression as well. And one of the hardest things for me to find is the Spanish Air Force wings. And that period, I have the correct wings, but it's missing the eagle, because it has the crown, and there's it's just one of those subtle differences that you research about. Like, the crown is different because in the Franco era, he proclaimed himself the regent, so he didn't use the crown from any of the houses that were competing for the throne. So a lot of people don't notice that. Like, I've caught people using the contemporary wings, but it's that extra mile that you go doing the research that pays off.
I didn't know about it.
Exactly.
So, for our listeners who doesn't know, what is the Blue Division?
Okay, the Blue Division was a volunteer force that came from Spain.
Was it under the SS?
No, not initially. We'll get to that in a few minutes. So, you know, we had the Spanish Civil War, and you had both sides fighting, and it was the Republicans that were sponsored by the Soviets, and you had the nationalists that were backed up by the Germans, the Italians. And when the nationalists, or the rebels, because that's what they were the ones that rebelled against the government that was in place. When they went to war, it was only months away from when World War II started. So the whole country was in shambles, and Franco didn't want to commit to be part of the Axis. He wanted to stay out of the war. But when the Germans invaded Russia, the Spaniards have all these demonstrations in Madrid and Seville and Barcelona that Russia is to blame. Rusia es culpable. And a lot of people on the nationalist side felt that need to go fight the Soviets in their home turf. And that's where a lot of pressure came to Franco. But Franco didn't want to commit. He still didn't want to go and be part of World War II. So his foreign minister, a man named Ramon Serrano Suñer, suggested that we should make a volunteer force. They're not officially part of the Spanish armed forces, and they're not sanctioned by the government. Therefore, they're going on their own. They were called the Spanish Division of Volunteers. That was their official name, but they became known as the Blue Division because of the Falange. That was the political party that was part of the nationalist cause, and they had a lot of influence and politics after the war. But the thing is that Franco didn't want them to have sole command of this division, so he selects his officers, career guys that fought in the Rif War, in the Civil War, guys that fought in the Spanish Foreign Legion. And then the first commander, a man named Agustin Munoz Grandes, was kind of like, I could say, the best of both worlds for everyone involved, because he supported the Falange, but he was a very austere guy. He was like, I'm here to do my job, nothing more, nothing less. And he was favored by the army and by the Phalanges. So he selected, when they start recruiting people, and we're talking a division size, this is 17,000 troops. They exceeded the quota over 3 times in 1 week. There was a waiting list for people to sign up. So they depart from Spain via train, and they arrive in France. They're welcomed by the Germans, and of course the French are not too happy about this. And there's an anecdote where the French start trying to pick fights with them. They get on the train, and the Spaniards start throwing empty wine bottles at them, which I find pretty funny. Very, very, very Iberian of them. And they go to all the way up to Grafenwohr, which actually still exists. I think it's a U.S. Army base. And that's where they do all their training. And one of the big problems was that the Spanish model for a division was 4 regiments, and the German was 3. So they had to break up 1 regiment, and they made the commander of that regiment the deputy commander of the division. It worked out well because that was actually the reserve component of the division, since they didn't have any other reserves available. So they had those guys back to replace the losses when they went into combat. And one of the things that really interested me about this impression was how the Spaniards are a big contrast to the Germans. You know, we look at the Germans and they're very proper people. they're not idle people. They always have something to do. They have a list. Something needs to get done. Um, the Spaniards are relaxed. They're more casual, And me being from where I'm from, 120 years ago, we were part of Spain. And when I first went to Spain, I realized how alike we are. And reading about how the Germans clashed with the Spaniards it's a very interesting thing to see, because the Spaniards just didn't care how the Germans looked at them. And they went outside, they womanized, they drank alcohol, they partied, they slept at their posts. And this created a doubt within the Germans. Are these guys going to deliver when it's go time? Um, and when they finally got to Leningrad, which they marched all the way from Grafenwöhr to Leningrad. And
That's in 1942?
41.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, still 41. One of the funny anecdotes of the march is that one of the colonels of the regiment, he got this Studebaker, and the car was brand new when it was issued to him. By the time they got to Leningrad, it was just in shambles. They, the journey to Leningrad just destroyed that car, and they cannibalized parts. They made stuff up to keep that car going. But when it was go time, these guys delivered. Their biggest battle. They faced a superior force with tanks. They were just one division, and they were relieved with SS Polizei, and I think it was I can't remember the top of my head, but I think it was 3 Russian regiments, and they held their ground and defeated them. And what in battle, these guys they just had a never die spirit, and that's when the Germans realized, like, these guys are worth having around. For the Spaniards, it was a very big shock of being in the cold, and seeing how things worked in the Eastern Front. Like they just came from a war where atrocities were being committed to their own people, and they had enough of that, and they they felt that they needed to fight the people that were to blame for what happened in the Civil War, but they never wanted to go hurt the civilians. And that's something that's really stuck with them, as far as the Spaniards were issued 2 rations, the Spanish ration and the German ration. And naturally, they did not like the German ration, but they would give it to the civilians, and they established a really good relationship with them. And it's something that the Soviets respected so much that they were invited. They were the only group of Axis soldiers invited for the 75th anniversary of the siege of Leningrad, and that speaks volumes. How the Soviets were able to invite those people. They didn't do that with anybody else that I could think of. And reading about a lot of the soldiers that fought over there, they really took to heart the hardship that they went through in the Eastern Front. But it soon came to an end. After 1943, the tides turned. There's a lot of pressure on Franco by the Allies that he needed to withdraw the division. And even though they even went as far as modifying the oath to state that they're fighting against Bolshevism. And So he decides to withdraw the division, and the division is reduced to what was called the Blue Legion. And these guys fought until 1944, and that's when Spain completely abandons the idea of having volunteers in the Eastern Front. So they're recalled, and you have only like the most hardcore guys that stay behind, and those are the guys that volunteer in the SS. And there's a lot of controversy as far as what went on there, since it was such a small unit. Like, one of the big things that I hear a lot on the forums, and I can't really get a definite answer on this, and I have to base that it didn't happen. All the people I ask is the Spain shield. As we know that all the volunteers had a shield of their nationality on the right side, on the right sleeve. So
On the right sleeve.
yeah, right, yeah, right sleeve.
Yeah, the other volunteers usually had it on the left sleeve.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
yeah, Spain had it on the. Wait, is it the right or the left? I can't. Uh, I'd have to look that up. Wait.
This is when I should say this is good audio entertainment.
Okay. Yeah, on the right sleeve. Right. That's
Yeah, that's
yep.
that's the right one.
Yep, on the right. There we go. And like some people say that they use the shield in the SS uniform, but there is no documentation on that. And I've tried to look. I've asked. I've gone to the Blue Division Museum and I asked them myself, like, "Hey, did this really happen?" And no one can give me a clear answer on that. And like I asked on the forums as well, and like I have to take it that it didn't happen. These guys probably, they did wear their the yoke and arrows from the phalange. Um, I I'm not sure if there were other soldiers other than the phalanges. Um, but yeah, that's something that is very subject to debate, and I just have to take it that it didn't happen. Um, which comes to the other thing about how the Spaniards wore their uniforms. You know, they were treated like a regular German army regiment, but um, they started taking these customs that were kind of unusual to the Germans, and it was, for instance, wearing the blue shirt over their collars, and it was not just the Phalange; it was um, the Spanish Legion guys as well. And contrary to the popular belief, not everyone was from the Phalange. You had people from all the walks of life. You had career soldiers, you had people who just felt the need to go over there and fight. You had even people that were serving for atonement, reducing sentences for family members from the Civil War, stuff like that, you know. And the thing is that the shirt was part of the volunteer uniform when they shipped out. You have the red beret from the Carlists, the blue shirt from the Phalange, and then the tunic and the pants from the Spanish Legion. And one thing that they started to adopt as well was using their medals. And um, you have to realize that a lot of these guys were veterans of the Civil War. So it was very common for them they kind of saw what the Germans were doing with their condecorations, and they said, well, if they're wearing their medals, we're going to wear ours. And they start wearing their medals on the um, German uniforms. Um, and of course, if you are very familiar, you could tell what what was the background of each soldier by just looking at his medals and the pins that he had. You know, you had guys that were in the university militia. You had guys that really young guys that had like kind of like what they had with the Hitler Youth, but with the Phalange, they had like a youth militia. And of course, you had the Legion guys that wore the emblem, which is the pike, the crossbow, and the blunderbuss, and that's a emblem you still see today because that's what the Legion is. But yeah, it's very interesting how people look at this impression because it's something that's completely out of the box in the sense that you're taking a German uniform and you're putting another country's awards on it completely. And there's people that come up to me and they just come out of curiosity. They're like, hey, what's this? You know, you're doing Blue Division. And you have some people, they come with skepticism. Um, Most of the time, it's the guys that do police impressions for some reason.
The chain dogs.
Yeah, you know those guys. I have a very funny story about that when me and Jose and Ben got together to do this impression in Gap. This was the Gap before we first met, and Ben asked me like, "Hey, Jose wants to do Blue Division at night. Are you in?" I'm like, "Of course I'm in. I'm finally, you know, there's gonna be well, there's actually four of us doing it, and one of the we did kind of like a scenario where we found an SS guy, and the Blue Division did have a feud with Fourth SS Polici. They couldn't stand those guys, so we came in and we kind of like grabbed him, and we went towards the Felged Arms, and of course they're thinking that they're law and order and all that, and they're thinking that we're for real and we're not. So like we let go of the guy, and as a final touch, I grab his cap and I toss it to the Felged Arms, and they just went nuts. You know, they started blowing their whistles, and it was cool because we started running away and we were laughing. And for a minute, I was like, "This is what these guys did." You know, they were messing with the Germans, and of course, one of the things we discovered about the Felged Arms, they don't get around pretty fast. So, you know, after 5 seconds, I look behind and they're like 100 yards away from me.
Oh, these stereotypes.
So, you know, we went and hid and all that. And the next day we got called, and the brigadier called us out, and we're like, hey, he thought it was for real. He thought that we were assaulting Grimbo. He was the guy doing SS, and we're like, no, we planned this, and he's like, oh, okay, and so we did a little PT in front of him and all that. It was really funny, and he was a great sport about it, and he actually got a big kick out of the whole thing, and of course, one of the things that made me laugh is like he. Being a veteran of the Falklands, he comes up to us and says, last time I heard guys speaking Spanish in uniforms, I shot at them. And of course, we just rolled laughing. It was hilarious. And that's where I realized that, you know what, we got something good going on with this impression. You know, like Jose's been great with it too. He has a lot of knowledge with the impression, and he's one of the guys that kind of like pushed to make this happen. And the big challenge with this impression is that you're restricted to the Eastern Front, and it's 41 to 43 and 44 if you want to do Blue Legion. And but in a niche, we found that in a garrison scenario, this works great because they were in garrison. They got, after they were in the front, they came back to Germany and they traveled back to Spain. You see pictures of them in in Paris. Pictures in Germany, um, and they they uh they made an impact in the environment of the everyday life of the German soldier. You're trying to have a beer at the bar, and these guys bust in speaking Spanish very loudly and saying hi to the girls, and you're like, what the hell are these guys doing here? And then you you tell them to shut up, and they get louder, and then they want to pick a fight with you, and then um, these guys, they were just happy go lucky, and I think that's one of the things I do like about this impression, where you could you could be a bit more in a heartwarming manner, where these guys just, they weren't just about fighting, they were just about having a good time too, and the Germans were taken aback by that. There's an anecdote where the German commander of the area didn't want them to fraternize with the females. So this this company was irate about it, and what they did was, the next day they got a bunch of condoms, inflated them, tied them to their rifles, and marched past the German commander. And you know, it they yeah, I know, it's funny. their their general, he didn't care about that. All he cares is that they delivered, and they looked at him in a very paternal way. Um, and it was a Munoz Grandes was a man that had a lot of charisma. He'd come in over, sit down with you. You could be a corporal and be like, "Hey, how are you doing? How's the front doing here?" Um, and Franco was aware of his charisma, and Hitler wanted him to succeed Franco. But Franco, being the guy he was, he switched him for another general, and then he promoted him beyond the rank to hold a division. And that's where Emilio Esteban Infantes comes in, and he came from a family of career officers, and he was more proper, and that kind of he was a big contrast to Munoz Grandes, in the sense that he was more detached from the front lines. He didn't interact with the troops like Munoz Grandes did, but he was very capable officer as well, and he was the general in command of the Battle of Krasny War, and he delivered as well. And these guys would have kept fighting. It's just that Franco knew that where the war was going and where what he needed to do, and he pulled his guys back. You know.
But you said that after the Blue Division kind of disbanded, people went to the SS.
Yes.
How many went to the SS?
I think it was about I can't remember if it couldn't have been more than 2 platoons.
All right, so not
or
too many.
Not too many. Yeah, like these were like the more hardcore guys. Actually, they fell in with the Wallonians. Like, there's one Blue Division soldier that he was half German, and he went into the SS, and it's one of the few pictures where they show an individual in the SS, and there's not a lot of documentation, and you have what's called uh, well, you have this guy. His name was Miguel Esquerra, and supposedly he won the Knight's Cross, and he fought the and well, he was there in the Battle of Berlin, but um, there's a lot of controversy with him that the book he wrote is exaggerated, but the thing is that there's no since they weren't sanctioned by the Spanish, there's no documentation. For instance, and in the Blue Division, there's tons of documentation on awards. German awards, Spanish awards, um, and you see even after the war, they were the only group of soldiers that actually wore the Wehrmacht awards after 1945. You see guys well into the 70s that are wearing Iron Crosses with swastikas. Like there's post-war productions of Iron Crosses that were made in Spain. You know, kind of like, let's say if you go to a PX and you lost your award and you need to get in one for an extra uniform or something like that. You know, like the Blue Squadron, they wore Luftwaffe badges. You know, there's pictures in color.
Yeah, because the Blue Squadron is Luftwaffe
Yeah,
Spanish volunteers. How many squadrons? Was it just one squadron?
it was 5 squadrons actually that rotated. The Blue Squadron was a different story. These guys, they were the top guns of the Civil War, and these guys had a great relationship with the Luftwaffe. They were friends with Werner Mulders.
Yeah, because Luftwaffe sent Messerschmitts down.
Exactly. They sent not the Messerschmitts first, but the biplanes, the Heinkels,
Yeah.
the Henschel dive bombers, but the planes that the Spaniards used the most, believe it or not, was the Fiat.
Oh.
Yeah. So you had a lot of Spaniards that trained in the Fiat biplane, and then all the other German airplanes. So these guys were the best of the best, and it was a very competitive thing. Where when they started with the Blue Squadron, they went to one of the senior pilots, a man named Angel Salas Lazaraval. And this guy was like, we're going to handpick everybody. And of course, all the aces, guys like um, Salvador, Julio Salvador Benjumea. You know, this guy was the only surviving member of the Blue Patrol, which was, these guys were like what Richthofen was in the First World War. The other two, pilots, one of them died in combat, and Spain's ace of aces, he died in doing aerobatic maneuvers after the war. Joaquin Garcia Morato, and you've probably seen it. There's an emblem that the Spanish still use to this day is 3 birds. It's a hawk, a blackbird, and a great bustard or something like that. It's called, and those 3 birds represent those 3 pilots. So these guys, a lot of them knew how to fly the Me 109. They were sent to places in France to get the training, and they went to the front, and they fell in under a German fighter wing. So there were 5 squadrons that rotated, and then the last squadron, the 5th squadron, they didn't actually see combat because they were just getting to the front as the decision was made to bring back everybody to Spain.
But the Blue Squadron were also around the Leningrad area.
Um, no, they were more south. They never supported the. They never gave aerial support to the Blue Division. Um, it's been a while. I've read up on that, but I think they flew missions to. It's south of Russia. But additionally to that, they had a Ju-52, and this is a very interesting story because when there was a logistical need to bring um, materials, food, parcels to the soldiers in the front. So what they decided to do initially, this is what they had in mind. So they were going to take one of the Ju-52s operating for Iberia, um, the airline, paid in Luftwaffe colors, and they were going to give the airline pilots Luftwaffe uniforms. They're going to be like, "Here, take this." But the uh, the Air Force intervened and said, like, "No, we can't do this way. You front up the airplane, and the pilot will be an Air Force pilot." And the first when they started this, they did it with one pilot, and they had a radio operator and a mechanic. And so this guy was at the controls by himself, and he flew from Madrid to Berlin to the front to Leningrad to wherever the Blue Squadron was, and back to Berlin and to Madrid.
That's a few hours.
Yes, that's, by today's standards, that's just,
Not legal.
yeah, I guess. But so this guy, he got injured by small arms fire. Some partisans started shooting at him from the ground, and he flew his airplane injured. And that's where they realized, well, we probably need two pilots to fly this thing. But yeah, it's just imagine you're doing that route and you have the possibility of getting shot at, and but yeah, after 1944, there was no sanctioned presence by Spain, and in the sense that there were no volunteers, because officially they weren't there. And one of the things that Jose discovered, because we had a big doubt with the Personalausweis that was issued to them because they were foreigners. And the thing about this Personalausweis is that it has no picture. Even though early soul books didn't have a picture, it was very vague. It just gave you your unit information, where you're from, and that's it. It didn't have the the pay information, the equipment information that a soul book has. So he discovered that they were actually issued the soul book. The thing is that when they came back to Spain and they were processed by the Germans, they gave up that soul book, but they kept the personal Ausweis because they needed some form of identity card in the territory.
Yeah, makes sense.
Um, but it's a very it's one of the impressions I've enjoyed a lot doing the research, and it's been very gratifying seeing it come together. It's been very gratifying reaching out to the people in Spain as well, to the people that run the Blue Division Museum, and these guys, like, when I came the first time to the museum, they were just really surprised that someone came all this way to learn about this, and they just, they I made some really good friendships over there, and they've been really helpful, and it's been a really good experience to be able to learn from them, and to learn that side of history, like today, learning about how Norway played into the Second World War. You know, I learned a lot about the king today. I had no idea the influence that the king and the crown prince had on the people of Norway, and that was some, you know, you learn, you keep learning in this hobby, and you keep discovering things. And
I've learned quite a bit just sitting here
well, you know, that's what it's all about. I hope we never stop learning, you know. Like 40 years from now, you learn something new from World War II, you know.
every day.
Oh yeah, you know, and it's like you and that's it's and I think it's something that complements everybody in this hobby, because we always we find that interest, you know. You start talking about what you know, and I'm like, wait a minute, I need to sit down and hear this, you know. The same with me. You're like, whoa, he's talking about something I haven't heard, you know. And I think one of the best things about the hobby is that we come together in that sense where we learn from each other, and I think that's a very positive thing. I think you know, social media could be sometimes a pain, and like there's times where I don't want to even look at the pages because I just don't want to get into it. I rather just, you know, like I just rather talk to people, and but the one thing I have to be grateful about social media is that it reached out to me with reenacting, you know. If I didn't have a Facebook account, I would never gotten into reenacting again. Well, you know, I found out about it, but I wasn't able to interact
Yeah.
because, like, I would send an email 10 years ago and it probably got trapped in someone's spam, you know, and they probably never heard about me ever, and you know, when you try to reach out to someone, they don't listen, you get tired and you just like, all right, well, I guess it's not meant to be,
Yeah.
you know. And it all started with, you know, page suggestion, Grunteufel reenactor group, you know, and that door opened, and here I am today, you know.
But you don't do Fallschirmjäger impression anymore, do you?
I haven't done it in a while.
But you still have it.
I still have everything, yeah. Like I'm trying to mix it up a bit. I'm doing British this year for D-Day, and it's
British paratrooper?
no, just British infantry, the Hampshire Regiment.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's always good to learn something new, and like it's just like starting all over again. You know, it's the oohs and ahs of like, wow, I found this, I found that, you know, and you know, trying to search for stuff, you know, and for instance, you know, I found these British Army forks that you know, I thought they're a whole lot harder to get than the German ones, in my opinion, because you know, at least the German ones, you have the repros out there. You could get some Bundeswehr ones, you know, that are pretty close, but like I had to actually switch my eBay settings to the UK and type in British Army fork, and I found it, and the guy like didn't, you know, he wasn't expecting someone to buy it from the US, so I'm like, I send him a PM like, hey, can you ship this to the US? And he's like, oh, okay. And you know, he kind of reconfigured. It took a little bit of you know, uh talking to one another, but it got done, you know.
That's nice though.
Oh yeah, you know, and it's all that stuff that comes together, you know. So I'm pretty excited about that. I can't wait till um August, you know, to have you know, I got the tent, I got everything. I even got a teapot that one of my friends found, and she told me like, "Hey, look at this." Like um and I'm like, "Okay."
Is it white?
No, it's a silver. Yeah.
Should have the classic white with the blue stripe on the top.
Oh, you mean that's the mug? No, I mean actually a kettle, a tea kettle.
Oh, a kettle.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
my bad. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the most British thing you can have.
Oh yeah, well definitely, you know, like drink tea and lemonade and all that.
I
So,
say, bloody hell.
yeah, bloody hell. Got to work on my accent a bit more.
Well, you can speak Spanish, I guess.
Yeah, but you got to work on that accent too, because I might sound Spanish, but I don't sound like a Spaniard. So.
Are your friends from Chile also doing British infantry?
One's doing American, the other one is doing British infantry with me.
All right.
So we kind of got motivated on that. I reached out to him like, "Hey, you want to do this?" And he's like, "Yeah." So
Well, that's cool. If someone were to ask you, how do I get started with the Blue Division impression? Uh, what sources would you tell them to go to?
well, I that is a really big challenge because a lot of the information is in Spanish. You have a couple Osprey books out there, and
But Osprey books are basic.
yeah, that's like Fisher Price for reenactors. So, um, there's a really good book. One of the what are those black books that always they're you have one about the tanks. Uh, it's that series of books where they're black and the yellow is I mean the letters are in yellow. Um, I think of all the English speaking books about the Blue Division, it has a lot of good information. Doesn't have a lot of pictures, but the stories are great, and all the information they got there. Um, Spain's where it's at. There's a lot like the Blue Division Museum has tons of books that you could get there. Like I got a really good book. I actually was lucky enough to meet the author that same day that I got the book, and he has all the condecorations, both German and Spanish, in this book. Um, you know, the other thing is just go to the forum, reach out to someone. Like it's pretty tough, because it's not a common impression. It's something that in the English speaking world, there's not a lot of information about it. I obviously I'm lucky enough because I speak the language, but if you have someone that doesn't, it's not going to be that easy. Um, but right now, there is enough of us out there that like people know that I do this, and I always get like PMs all the time, like, "Hey, there's this guy that's interested in Blue Division." Um, Jose gets them as well, and we got some groups out there as well. We have a División Azul group, and in Spain they have they're more of a historical standpoint, not really reenactor um, pages. There are reenactors in Spain that do Blue Division. They actually do Krasny Bor reenactment every February. Um, but yeah,
There can't be many reenactors doing the Blue Division impression.
no, like in the States at least, it's not even more than 10 of us, and I'd like to get more following, get more people to have a presence, and I'm quite aware of that. And it's one of the things that like I'm not, you know, you're not gonna show up to an event just, oh hey, I'm the Blue Division guy, let me just be here, you know. Like if we could get at least 5 guys, or ideally 10, to have that presence and make it look like a unit, like it's one of yeah, you had that Italian guy that showed up the other day that he wanted to go to D-Day. That doesn't work that way. If maybe for a living history impression, you could you could show up and you know do that, but for a tactical or a field event, you got to have cadre. You can't just be that one guy that shows up with the random impression and expect to fit in.
Yeah.
Like
Well, that can be difficult with the Blue Division impression.
and the other thing is it's restricted to the Eastern Front only. Like don't show up the Battle of the Bulge with the Spanish shield. That's just not.
Well, you got a stereotype of the D-Day event with SS fighting on the beaches versus U.S. Airborne.
Yeah, but it's a public event,
Yeah,
and
of course.
they got it's an actual unit doing that. Yeah, but like lo- showing up as the one guy doing that thing, that's not.
Yeah, it should be a unit.
Yeah, and I think that's we got enough guys, but we're all spread apart. Like one guy lives in Florida, other in Pennsylvania. There's guys in California that want to do it, and it's not an impression for everybody. Like most of us do actually speak the language. And it it comes together better. And I'm not saying this that you don't need to learn the language, because we do German and we don't, but it would be nice to see a bigger following, and I'm hopeful for it, but I'm aware and grounded that it's something that we'll do it whenever we can get together, or whenever I it's plausible to do it. Like I would like to go to Haydenville, and if there was like 5 or 10 of us, and I got all the equipment, we could like make a paella, stuff like that. Um, uh, I would like to have someone with a guitar, and you, you know, but it's you got to be realistic, you just have to be realistic about what you can do and cannot do, and unfortunately that's how it is.
Well, it's just to start recruiting, I guess.
Yeah, it would be nice to do, but we'll see. Hopefully, there's more guys that show interest in it, and like I'd like to get with Jose, and really make it take off.
Yeah. But as a last note, um, what's the this is more kit oriented, but the Blue Division, they did have German uniforms and German weapons.
Oh yes,
They were part of the German army.
exactly.
But what's the main differences between the Blue Division and a regular German soldier, uniform wise?
Well, I wouldn't say uniform wise, but one of the things I do notice is the hair. A lot of the Spaniards didn't cut their hair in the German manner. Actually, you see them with slightly longer hair, still a cropped haircut, but you know, um, obviously the mustache is another Spanish trait. Um, the blue shirt, having non-German emblems that were particular to the Spaniards as far as the Spanish army. Um, if you were a legionnaire, some of the guys would wear their legion pin on their tunic or on their hat. If you were phalange, you wore phalange emblems, and that was something that was uh, the Spaniards didn't think twice about it. They showed their allegiance politically and military in a military fashion as well. Um, most of the You'll see some of them wearing Spanish buckles. The officers wore their belt buckles. Um, one of the uh, one of the footage the pictures is showing the general Munoz Grandes doing the oath of allegiance, and he's wearing a German tunic and he's wearing Spanish pants because his uniform wasn't readily available. Um, of course, the other big thing is the shield, and not just on the tunic but on the helmet as well.
Yeah,
So
instead of the German
the
eagle.
tricolor, no, instead of the
All
tricolor.
right, but did they stop wearing the Spanish flag there? Because the tricolor was removed in 1940.
Yeah, but the Spaniards used the German flag. I mean the the Spanish yellow and red. So they wore,
throughout the war.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure about the Blue Legion, but yeah, for as far as the Blue Division, they did. Um, like you'll see some pictures of Luftwaffe of Spanish Air Force ground personnel in their Luftwaffe mantles wearing the Spanish Air Force buckle. Um, you'll see just little stuff that you really have to look at the picture and see what's going on. Um, for instance, the Munoz Grandes, the first general in command of the division, he wore regular mantle. He didn't wear a general's mantle. Um, he didn't wear a general's field cap neither. Um, and he really didn't wear any of his medals other than the Knight's Cross and the Iron Cross when it was awarded to him. There's pictures of that. Um, with the Blue Squadron, they had all kinds of they had all their medals during their swear when they made the oath of allegiance. And these guys, they had a lot of medals. These guys were, once again, these guys were aces in the Civil War. Um, and yeah, pretty much those are the differences. But as far as being issued the same kit as a German soldier, it was identical. The equipment, weapons, you know. Um, for the Blue Squadron, a lot of their items were most of their items were private purchase. So one thing you'll never see the Blue Squadron is wear the leather jackets that kind of like the motorcycle jackets. They did wear the cold weather ones, and the channel suit type leather jackets. Um, the type that was the winter one. You had the white one and the black one, and there's that other jacket that has the side pocket. Eric Hartman has a picture in it, which has the big fur collar, um, and they not a lot of them wore riding breeches. They just wore the regular Luftwaffe straight pants, and they even flew with those. So that's something I noticed a lot in the Blue Squadron compared to like other Luftwaffe pilots that were officers. The other thing is, and the Spanish pilots, they were all officers. There was no NCOs or enlisted men. Um, they were pilots, unlike the Germans and the RAF and some other countries that fought in the war. Um, from the top of my head, that's all I could think of. Of course, there was a contingent of the Spanish Navy that served in the Kriegsmarine as well, but they were um, mostly they were much smaller force, and they were kind of like observers and doing technical stuff. And they were mostly in the Lake Ladoga, um, and but those were only officers and NCOs. There was no seamen or Gefreiters or anything like that. They were mostly petty officers and above.
Yeah.
Um,
So the Spanish were everywhere in the German military.
yes, they just wanted to mostly, they just wanted to fight the Russians, and of course, they got a lot of technical expertise from the Germans, and we obviously see that after the war, where they had their own versions of the 109 and the Heinkel and the Ju-52. They even have German tanks and artillery, um, and of course, the big irony is that all those German airplanes were fitted with Merlin engines. So,
Well, a better sound.
Well, I guess so. It looks kind of funny though.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I don't think we got any more time to keep on going.
All right. Well, it's been great, man. Like thanks for having me here,
Thanks for wanting to be here.
No, I appreciate it. Um I hope this helps a lot, and like anybody out there, if you want to do Division, you I don't think it's that difficult to find me on social media and all that stuff. So, you know, um I'm more I myself, I'm more than willing to help out people with the impression, and the other guys just the same, Um, there's there are more of us out there that know about the impression than people tend to think, and it'd be great to have someone that's interested in it.
Well, maybe you'll wake up tomorrow and there's like 500 Blue Division reenactors.
Well, who knows? One can only hope, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well then, thank you.
Hey, thank you, Lasse.
And goodbye.
Take care, man.